Hi everybody, this is a video from Miss Duckworth's classroom, and today I'm going to be talking to you about how to analyse the literature extract for the Cambridge 0475 Literature Paper 1. Today I'm going to be looking at just the extract question. In some of my other videos you'll be able to find advice on how to look at the full novel question, but for today we're just going to be looking at the extract and we're going to be focusing on the novel A Separate Piece. So what do you need to know about this paper? So it is a two-part paper. The first section will be your poetry and then the second section will be your novel. You've got roughly 45 minutes for this particular section of the exam, so you want to split your time evenly between the poetry and the prose. Use your time wisely. Make sure that you spend enough time reading the extracts, making the plan, writing up your response and then checking. Roughly you should be aiming to spend about 15 minutes on the extract, reading through the extract, trying your best to analyse and understand the extract, and then selecting the points that you want to make for your answer. It's going to be much easier if you practice the same method over and over again, so you get used to how you are going to be responding in the actual exam itself. Today I'm just going to go through how you approach the extract, what you need to understand about the extract, and how you select the points that you want to talk about. In the video following this, I'll be talking about how you actually write up your answer. So a lot of people ask me, how am I supposed to answer this question? So you are presented with a short extract from anywhere in the novel, and this can be a little bit daunting, but don't panic. The most important thing is that you need to know what the examiner is looking for in your answer. So in terms of the mark scheme and the criteria that you are being assessed on, first of all, let's look at AO1 and AO2. You need to show evidence that you've got a good understanding of the extract. So at this point, you have read the novel hopefully more than once. You've got a very good understanding of the characters, the relationships, how they progress, how they change, how things develop. And so that's what the examiner is looking for. When they present you with the extract, you're expected to understand what you see. What's happening with the characters? Do they change over the course of the extract? What kind of relationships do you see? What specific thing is happening? Remember that they're going to try and pick an extract that there's a lot happening in there for you to comment on. So think to yourself, what is specific about this extract? What is significant? What is interesting? What do I see? How do I know that this is important? How has Knowles highlighted this particular example for me? You also need to have good reference to the text. Now, this is different to the full novel question, because in the full novel question, you won't really be able to use direct quotations. You'll mostly be paraphrasing. For this particular question, as you've picked the extract question, you will have to make reference, which means that you've got to select appropriate quotations to support your points. You've also got to show deeper meanings. Can you infer? Can you interpret meaning? Can you layer your meaning? Can you pick out multiple meanings from one quotation or one example? Can you comment on author intention? What is John Knowles trying to show you? Why did he use this particular word? What does he want you to understand about the character of Jean or Leper? What does he want to show you about the relationship between the boys? What does he want to show you about adolescence? And also try and support your answer with relevant contextual information. Please do not just add on contextual information if it's not linked to what you're talking about. So there's no extra marks for you giving dates or you just saying this is set during the war. So if it supports your answer, by all means mention it. If it doesn't support your answer, then leave it out. AO3, the ability to demonstrate good understanding of how the events, the characters, the relationships are presented to you. The focus here is on the word presented. That is referring to authorial choices and methods. Everything that John Knowles decides to show you, he decides to show you in a particular way. This is where you want to show that you understand how language, structure, and form has been used. In terms of form, it's a novel. Obviously, we know it's a novel. But let's talk about what you can say in terms of the form. If you talk about characterization, how a character is created or developed, then you are talking about the form. Descriptions of setting, for example, are also linked to the form. Themes that you may want to comment on. Narration, perspective. The fact that you talk about Jean as an unreliable narrator is also an element of form. Structure. Structure can be in terms of how the extract is organised, the chronology, the order of events, what actually happens, when it happens, why one thing happens before another, why one character would say this but then react in this particular way. Sentence types. If short sentences are used, why are they used? What's the effect? What kind of punctuation has been used and how does this add to the effect of the sentence or add to the effect of the description? Look at description versus dialogue. When do these things occur? Why? Language. Language may be slightly easier. This is to do with the words used and the impact. So think about word choice. Why was this particular word used? What can you infer? So if we go back up here, if you're talking about language and you're making inferences, you're also hitting AO1 and AO2. How are you interpreting the words? What do they mean? Are there any connotations? Are there any devices that you can talk about? Any similes or any metaphors? What do they show you about the character or the actions or the relationship or the setting even? You must also show that you know why. Why are they presented in this way? So you want to be looking at your what, your how, and your why. What is shown to you? How is it shown to you? Why is it shown in this way? If you can remember your what, your how, and your why throughout analysing the extract, but also writing up your answer, then you'll be able to hit all of the different AOs. And finally, we have AO4. This is to do with how you then construct your ideas. Present your ideas in a coherent and relevant way and develop your own personal response. The examiner is not expecting to hear thousands of responses that are exactly the same. It is fine for you to develop your own personal response in response to the question, but also in response to the extract. What do you think about Jean, or what do you think about leper, or how do you interpret the relationship between Jean and Finney? Make sure that when you are writing your essay up that you are basing it on a plan that you have made. So it should be focused in a coherent way. So you don't want to start off by talking about a metaphor that has been used to describe the setting, but then return to that same metaphor at the end for no reason. So make sure all similar ideas are grouped together. Okay, so we're going to have a look at this particular extract that I picked for today. And the question is, how does Knowles powerfully present Jean's fear in this section of the novel? So if you have chosen this in your exam, this is what you'll be faced with. Before we look at the extract, we're just going to go through a few steps in terms of how you respond. So the steps. First of all, read the question. Deconstruct the question. Deconstruct merely means to pull the question apart. What are the key words? What do these words mean? What are you being required to do? And what is your focus? So when you have the question, we have the question down here, highlight the key words. What do they mean? What is your focus? What are you looking at? It's always a good idea to write these on top of the extract, as it will keep you focused. So if we look here, how does Knowles powerfully present Jean's fear in this section of the novel? So powerfully, these are the words that you also want to try and repeat, or synonyms of these words in your answer. Focus here is Jean's fear. So what you are looking for is anything now that is linked to Jean's fear in some way. And this again is where your interpretation comes in. Just because something doesn't obviously stand out as being Jean's fear doesn't mean it's not related to Jean's fear or it's not a result of Jean's fear. So be open-minded when you're making your choices and see how far you can interpret. Step 2. Now you can read through the extract. So you know what you're looking for. You're looking for Jean's fear. Before you start to annotate your extract, just ask yourself a few questions. Remember, we're trying to think about what's important in this extract. Why has it been chosen? So think about where it's from. So what part of the novel is it from? This will help you to think about what events have already happened at this point, what's yet to happen. Also helps you to understand the significance of characters, their development, and also relationships. Think about who is involved. Where is it? So can we comment on the setting? Is that particularly important? What is significant about this extract? Why is it important? What is the mood that's been created for you by Knowles? What is he trying to show you? Why is he trying to show you this? Remember that the question will give you a clue. The question here is Jean's fear. So what is he trying to show us about Jean's fear? Why does he want to show us this about Jean's fear? Always keep coming back to these questions. What do you already know about the focus? In this case, the focus is Jean. So what do you already know about Jean? Give yourself time to brainstorm all of the things that you know about this particular character, because you may then see these in the extract. You could do a lot of the work before you even read through the extract yourself. Okay, so let's go back to the extract. What I would like you to do is just think to yourself, what is the significance of this extract? And what do I already know about Jean? So I would like you to pause the video, think to yourself as you read through, what do I know here, or what do I learn about Jean's fear? How do I learn it? Why? But also try and answer these two questions. So just give yourself between 5 and 7 minutes to read through this extract and make your notes. Okay, so hopefully you've managed to go through and make your notes about the significance of this extract, what it is that you learn about Jean and his fear, and also think about what you already know about Jean. So can you use any of the knowledge that you already have to describe him in this particular extract? Some of the things that you could have written down, or you may have noted, is that this extract actually comes from chapter 7. Now, you don't need to be able to remember the exact chapter, but you do need to be able to position it within the main events of the novel. So this is obviously after Finney's fall. Finney actually isn't at Devon anymore, he's recovering at home, which means that Jean is there by himself. We also have the character of Brinker. We know that he is one of the significant characters as well. Obviously we have Jean here, but we also have the setting. Setting is quite important. Sometimes the setting will stand out for you, sometimes it may kind of fade into the background. This one, because we have the setting of the book room, which is described like a dungeon, that should actually stand out for you. We also have lots of different themes here. So we have guilt, we have suspicion, we have blame, we have lots of conflict. Conflict is always an easy one to look out for whenever you see any kind of conflict, be it with society, between individuals, or even inner conflict, which is personal to a character. It's always something interesting to comment on. We also have this theme of adolescence. They are still teenagers, and we have this idea of a mock interrogation, which actually is taken a little bit further later on in the novel with the mock trial. In terms of what you may already know about Jean, he is a jealous character at various different points in the novel, particularly when it comes to Finney. He's quite deceitful, which is why we will often refer to him as an unreliable narrator. He exhibits this kind of deceit to his friends, sometimes to himself, and sometimes to us, the readers. We know that he's in competition with Finney. We've had lots of examples of that already. We know he can be quite destructive. He's the reason for Finney's fall when he jants the limb. We know he's the narrator. This is an aspect of your form. So all of the information that we get through Jean, and that's very, very important to note. We also know that he can be fairly paranoid, and his mind can run away with him at times. So these are all things that you either could have brought with you in terms of your understanding, and also these are things that you can select in terms of how significant the extract is. So we now are done step 2. We've gone through all these different questions and we've tried to ascertain why it's important, why it's significant, but also what we learn. Okay, so now we're going to move on. The next step is step 3. So once you have a good understanding of the extract, and do make little notes about this as you go, highlight anything relevant to the question. And it may be that you start off and you highlight more than you need, and that's okay, because there will be time for us to go back and eliminate any of your choices, eliminate anything that you no longer think is necessary. Now, in terms of what to highlight, I do often get asked the question, what am I looking for? What should I be highlighting? So over here, you'll see a list of certain things that you can look out for. You won't find all of these in every single extract, but it's just an interesting list to have just in case you're struggling for things to find. So let's just quickly go through this. How is the extract organised? This is in reference to the structure. How do things progress, change, or develop? So you may notice that certain language is used at different points in the extract, and it builds up an atmosphere, or it develops a character, or it shows a relationship. What's the tone or the mood that is created for you? What is significant? Always ask yourself what stands out. in this extract? Is it an unusual word? Is it something that a character does that is quite strange or unusual? Something will stand out for you, and that's what you need to try and comment on. Which words in particular stand out? So is there a metaphor, or is there a verb that stands out, or is there a particularly aggressive word that just jumps out to you? What do the words suggest? This is where your analysis comes in. What are the connotations? What can you infer? How can you interpret the meaning of these words? Are there any techniques that you can comment on? So is there repetition? Are there short sentences? Are there metaphors? Is there alliteration? Are there harsh verbs? What kind of sentences have been used? Why have they been used? What kind of imagery has been used? And also you can link back to structure at any time here. What kind of imagery has been used? Where has it been used and why? What can you say about the clauses? Do you have embedded clauses that you can maybe comment on? What is suggested about the characters or the actions or the events? What is suggested to you about relationships? Are the relationships strong here? Are they fraught? Is there conflict? What is the author trying to show you about characters, actions, events, and relationships? How do you react as a reader? How are you supposed to react? Can you comment on narrative perspective? This links back to form. Can we comment on Jean as a narrator here? And are there themes that stand out to you that you can comment on? So we have this list, and we're going to go back through the extract and we're going to try and find anything that stands out. Okay, so we will start with the first slide. Don't forget as well to use your list to help you as you go back through the extract to highlight. So maybe you want to look out for any of these words that you already have, or maybe you think, oh, actually, I will comment on the setting and I will look at the language that's used to describe the setting. So use all the notes that you've been making as you go. Okay, so we're just going to take a look at this first page. So we're going to be going through and just picking out anything that we think is significant. So what I often do in my classes is I'll model how I would pick things out, and I may not decide to keep all of these examples, but I'll just go through with you my own thought process. So the first thing that stands out to me is this word dungeon. So any imagery that you see, you should be commenting on, or you should be asking yourself why it's been used. So the first thing that I want to do is to think, okay, we're starting off with this word dungeon. Now you think about the connotations of dungeon. We think of maybe torture. We think of fear, which does link back to the question. We think of danger. So already this is interesting to me. Now what I notice here is that we have repetition of dungeon, which makes it even more interesting. And we have this extension of the metaphor here with this idea of it being in the bowels. So this automatically stands out, and it's a huge juxtaposition between the reality of their situation of being at school and the way that Jean chooses to describe it. So as we carry on going, another piece of imagery that stands out is this simile here, like criminals. So again, juxtaposes what we actually have in front of us, which is a group of teenage boys. But because I already know Jean, I already know that this actually does stand out because he is guilty of hurting his friend. So we'll carry on going and look for anything that stands out. And the tables were mutilated. Then what we see here is all of these words and this imagery that's created, they're all kind of linked together. They're all very negative. They all hint at danger or fear. This word here, prisoner, also links back to this idea of torture or this idea of interrogation. As we're moving on, we have this seizing my neck. So the aggression of this language here makes it stand out. Move down a little bit further. We have he paused impressively. Now I don't yet know if I'll use this, but it stands out for me at the moment. I ask myself, why has the word impressively been used? Maybe it's relevant later on. Carrying on with this idea of the violence of the actions, we have snap of the neck, and we also have my teeth set. So this action stands out for me. It's quite animalistic, suggests aggression. Let's move on. Then we have language. We have actual dialogue here between the characters. God damn it, shut up. And note the shortness of these sentences, but also the exclamation marks. So we can interpret the mood here. We can think about the emotions of the characters. So that may stand out for me later on. And then we have this sudden change. The radio had suddenly gone quiet. Voice was ringing. And then we have this idea of a hush. So you also want to be looking at, when you're moving through your extracts, any change. So if we look at the violence or the negativity that we have up here, we have these harsh verbs and actions, have this harsh language, and then the tone shifts slightly. Everything goes quiet. His voice is ringing, and a hush has silenced everybody. So it's almost like we're waiting for something to happen. It's like the mood suddenly gets very, very tense. So if we move on, we have this imagery, a boy uncoiled tensely from the couch. Again, very animalistic, almost like a snake getting ready to attack. Then we have this down here, I had to take part in this or risk losing control completely. So this is Gene trying to qualify what he's about to do. This is Gene's explanation of what he's doing, and it may be interesting later on. And then we have what his dialogue with everybody else. All I did was drop a little. So we have this dash here, which suggests that he's pausing, or he's hesitating, or he's unsure of what he's going to say next. And then we have the repetition, which links back to this. Is he hesitating? Is he unsure? Is he scared? Can we link it back to this idea of fear? So if you think about what we've done on this first page, we've spoken about the organisation. We've maybe made links between what's been said. We've mentioned the tone. We've tried to think about why things are significant. Comment on why words have been used. If something stands out for you, think about why. What is Noel's trying to show you by this particular word? We've also highlighted some techniques. So we have dashes, we have short sentences, we have interesting punctuation, we've got metaphors, similes, interesting verbs. Commented on the sentences. We've highlighted any kind of imagery. We haven't really got to any relationships yet. We have this so far in terms of the tense atmosphere, maybe the relationships that he has with others. But also we can infer that the way that he speaks here is a comment on his relationship or how he feels in this particular situation. Also, as you're doing this, think about how you react. Do you feel tense? Do you feel nervous? Do you feel that something is about to happen? And when we finally go through and select our choices, we will comment on narrative perspective. Because as I've mentioned earlier, we do need to remember that this is Gene who is relaying the events to us, so they may be slightly skewed or manipulated. Okay, so now we're on to the second part of this extract. So if we look up here, then we have Brinker glowered at me. So think about that word. And then we have this repetition of laughed. So we have this contrast here of the actions of the two boys. But the fact that we have this repetition of laughed, and it's uncontrollably, shows that maybe his fear is taking over. Maybe he doesn't know how to respond to this situation. And then we have this, I tried to let my face fall guiltily. Now we can actually comment on narrative perspective here. This is all very contrived. And then we have as if it were being dragged downward. Now note that we also have alliteration here of face fall and drag downward. So that stands out. Maybe that's something we can comment on later. And then we have this, tell us everything, a younger boy at the table said huskily. So now we can maybe talk about the reactions of others and the relationships. There was an unsettling current in his voice. So why do we have this imagery here? Why is there an unsettling current? Can we link this to Gene's fear? And then we have, his attitude seemed to me almost obscene. It's quite a strong word to describe the way that this boy is behaving. The attitude of someone who discovers a sexual secret of yours and promises not to tell a soul. So we already know that Jean is hiding something, and it's interesting that he links it to a sexual secret being discovered when his secret is that he jounced the limb, which is why Finney fell. Okay, and then we have this, I replied in a stronger voice. So we have this comparative here to maybe show how Jean's character is developing or how he's responding to the others. And then we have this repetition down here again, and we also have the ellipsis. And we can link it back to what we already said with the dashes and the repetition of maybe he's hesitant, or he's worried, or he's scared, or even it could be this is contrived. His reaction is contrived in order to create an effect on those that he's speaking to. And then we have this repetition of dungeon again, and it's linked with this idea of it being a nightmare. So we have this link back to the start of the extract, which obviously links back to this idea of how the extract is organised, how this particular passage is organised. And then I could feel my throat closing on them. So this imagery here shows that maybe his body is preventing him from revealing the words that he should. So maybe his body is going against his natural instincts. And then again we have repetition, shows his resolve here. And then we have this verb, I swung, quite violent and aggressive. I swung on the younger boy. And then we have, he asks his own question. So again, comment on any time that maybe we have a shift or a change in the extract. So he is now the one asking the questions, and it's paired with this demanded. So he's turned on them, the situation has shifted. And then we end here with another question, and he's mocking. Then what happened, Sherlock Holmes? So he's trying to now mock the boys that are asking him the questions. His eyes swung guiltily back and forth. So this is the effect that his words have had on everybody else. And in the final paragraph here, we have, he had a very weak foothold among the bookroom crowd, and I had pretty well pushed him off. So we see here that Jean is regaining some of his power or his strength. So this is quite different to different parts of the extract, so maybe we should talk about that. And then we have this word defeat. So Jean has managed to defeat those that have been questioning him. So we have this change in the hierarchy or the power situations within this particular extract. Okay, so now we have all of these examples highlighted. Hopefully you had some of those highlighted already. And if you noticed as I went through, I just spoke out loud to you about what you could say, what I was noticing. You could do that as you write these down. So do annotate as you go. If you see a simile, write it down. If you think a word is interesting, say why. If you think it's a short sentence, write that down, because when you then come to make a plan and when you come to write up your answer, you can use all of these notes and it'll make it much quicker for you in terms of formulating your response. So once you've highlighted, you can then start to make your plan. Now, there are far too many examples that I've highlighted, but that was just my first response to the extract. So now you need to think to yourself, which examples help me to answer this question? Which examples are interesting enough for me to comment on? And which examples are now of no use? As you go back through, you should be asking yourself now more directly, is this relevant to the question? Can I make a point out of Jean's fear in relation to this particular example? Do I have enough to say? Do I even understand what I see in front of me? There's enough in there that you can now start to eliminate ones that you don't think are useful anymore. Once you've made your decisions, then think about what you can say about the examples that you've chosen. You may already have notes from your first attempt at highlighting, so you may not need to make any more notes. But whatever you do say, remember that these notes will help you with your main points. You may say something that actually forms part of the topic sentence, and then actually all you're doing is then filling in your example and analysing it. Think about your initial ideas in response to the question and Jean's fear. Your evidence obviously should support whatever you are saying. How is your idea shown in the evidence? This how is very, very important. What technique shows your point? Is it to do with language or is it to do with structure? And then we go back to this why. Why does Knowles do this? So at the beginning of this lesson, I did mention that these key words will help you hugely in your exam. What do you see? What do you learn? What is your idea? What is your evidence? How are you proving this? And then how is your idea shown in the evidence? How is always linked to technique or method. And then why? Why does Knowles do this? What does he want you to understand? Okay, so if we go back through the extract, we need to decide what we're going to keep and why. And we also need to make sure that it's linked back to Jean's fear and how it shows Jean's fear. So if we go back to the beginning, these ideas about the setting, they're all quite interesting. And as we spoke about the idea of torture or fear or punishment, they actually do link quite nicely with Jean's fear. So I would choose to keep a lot of this imagery. I may not need every single one of these, but this will form part of one of my sections in terms of how Jean's fear is maybe manifested in the setting, and then you could choose some of these examples to show that. I probably wouldn't keep something like he paused impressively, did initially stand out, but there's not much that we can say about that, so we'll cross that one out. We could probably keep this in terms of the actions of Jean. His reactions show how he feels, and we could argue that this does show an element of his fear. The reason he reacts in such an aggressive way is maybe he's on the defensive. We can also link that to his language here. So all of this is quite relevant. This idea of a boy uncoiled tensely from the couch, we could link to mood, and we could link to maybe Jean's perspective of what's happening. Snakes are often linked to deceit as well, so maybe this is an idea of Jean projecting the way he feels about himself onto the actions of others. Probably not best to keep this, but at the end I had to take part in this. All I did was drop a little. Whilst repetition and the hesitation here is interesting, there's probably better things that we can comment on elsewhere. So if we have a look here, all of this in terms of his response to Brinker and the nervousness exhibited here would probably be a good thing to comment on. His actions. So there are multiple things that you can comment on in terms of a character. What they say, what they do, in terms of a narrator, what they reveal to the reader, but also how other people view them. This particular evidence here is to do with his actions, and we also have the alliteration that we can talk about here. A lot of this here is to do with the mood, so we could keep a lot of this to talk about the mood that's created here and how Jean reacts to that. Probably don't need this idea of stronger voice. This idea of the dungeon and the nightmare, definitely we could keep because we could pair it with what we had on the previous slide from earlier on. Repetition here, we could link back to his nervousness, possibly could be linked up here. And if you'll notice, what I'm trying to do as I go through is I'm trying to link points together. So if you do find that you have something similar here, well, I would say that then I shows hesitation, nervousness, then maybe you want to say the same thing here. Laughed uncontrollably shows hesitation and the fact that he is quite nervous. So maybe that would just be a point. Jean's fear is manifested through the fact that he repeats certain words or his actions. And then you can pick the evidence that you think links in. Perhaps wouldn't keep I swung on the younger boy, but possibly would keep this idea of the questions. The questions and the language here is potentially more interesting than I swung on the younger boy. His eyes swung guiltily back and forth. We could probably link back to other points that we have on how other characters are reacting to Jean or how he interprets their actions, particularly when we link back to the snake imagery and the uncoiling tensely. and perhaps wouldn't keep this bit at the end, because we have much more up here that is slightly stronger than the points we have down here. But again, this is a process that you will go through yourself, and you will decide which points do you feel the most confident in talking about, which techniques do you see and do you think link back to the question. So this is just an example of how you can formulate your own answers. Okay, so once you have gone back through and you've selected the evidence that you want to keep and you've eliminated the ones that you don't think are relevant, hopefully you'll have gone through a similar process to me in terms of maybe linking some ideas together, or maybe half formulating a point as you go through. And once you've done that, you can come back and you can make a plan. So this is just an example of some of the ideas that I was mentioning as I was talking through the extracts. So as I was talking it through and as I was interpreting the language or the meaning, there was a lot that I was commenting on in terms of setting. So maybe one of the points that I will talk about is setting. Now, whenever you make your point or your topic sentence, always go back to the question. And if you're ever unsure, just rephrase the question. So the question is, how does Knowles powerfully present Jean's fear in this section of the novel? You could merely rephrase this. Knowles powerfully presents Jean's fear in this section of the novel through his description of the setting. And then you would add more to the description of the setting once you start to include the language that's been used and you talk about the connotations and why that particular imagery has been used. We also have Jean's view of and relationship with Brinker and with others, and in terms of how he perceives them and how he responds to them. We've got Jean's actions and how he describes these. So remember, he's the one that's describing these. So we only understand others and himself through Jean's own perception. What Jean says. So we have what Jean says, but also what he does, what he says to the others and how he says it. And we also have Jean's internal monologue, so his thought process and the way that he describes things to us. Now, you probably wouldn't be able to mention all of these in your answer. So what you would do is you would have your plan, and then you would think to yourself, okay, I have a lot that I can say about this one. This is one that I will keep. I don't really know what I would say about this one, even though there are a few items on there, so I'm going to discard this one. And I actually would like to comment on Jean's internal monologue, because I think this really links back to the fear that he exhibits. So maybe in the end you would just pick 3. And remember that you would have about 30 minutes to write your answer. So then you would have to just think to yourself, what can I get through in 30 minutes? So what do you have now? You have what you want to say about how Jean's fear is presented. You have your evidence. You hopefully have got techniques that you can comment on because you've been annotating and analysing as you've been going. You've got lots of notes on analysis, and you've got a clear plan of what you want to talk about. Once you have all of this together, you can use this to write up your answer in detail. And a final thing is, just remember that for this question, follow the dream technique. We've done all of these things as we've gone through. We've deconstructed the question. We have read, understood, and highlighted the extract. We've then analysed any choices that we've decided to keep. We've eliminated anything irrelevant or anything that is too weak for us to comment on. And then we've made a plan. So try and remember the dream technique, because this will help you in terms of how you utilise those 15 minutes of reading and annotating and selecting. So thank you very much for taking part in this lesson. Look out for the next one, which is how to write up your answer. And I wish you good luck in your exams. Goodbye.